今から君が僕のダーリンだ。
There was once a point of time to where you could not escape Zero Two. You would go online and she was all that you would ever see. You'd even go outside and you'd be sitting in traffic and see cars passing with Zero Two stickers all over them. All of the cosplay, all of the art, all of the clips you saw online, all of them were just
ダーリン、おはよう。はい、ダーリン。ダーリン。
But it only took episode 19 24 minutes to essentially take Zero Two and Darling in the Franxx and just throw them in the trash with all of the other bad ending animes. Taking it from one of the most talked about animes at the time to the anime that people go, hey, I remember that anime. It kind of fell off, right? Let's start from the beginning. Darling in the Franxx was first released in the year 2018, which, just to make you feel a little bit older, is 6 years ago. Wow, that's actually a little bit crazy now that I think about it. Which was a joint venture produced by Cloverworks and then animated by Studio Trigger and A1 Pictures. Which sounds amazing. I mean, those are two really popular and great anime studios, so if they come together, it's basically bound to be a great relationship. But in interviews, it was a relationship that was described as a relationship of oil and water. You know, the thing famously known for not mixing together? Yeah, who would have thought that this anime wouldn't really work out in the end? When you think of mech anime, there's almost two of them that I guarantee just popped into your mind right now, and that's Evangelion and Gurren Lagann. Both of those were animated by Studio Gainax. But a lot of the animators from Studio Gainax left and they joined Studio Trigger, which led to the relationship of how Darling in the Franxx was created, as the Studio Trigger employees were more used to animating things like mech, while A1 Studios was noted as being better at the everyday life and more of the subtle dramas. And it's very clear when you look into the production of the anime that it's very reminiscent of the mechs of the 90s and the early 2000s, similar to things like Evangelion. And honestly, I do feel like they were able to achieve that same feeling. Initially, it transported you into this world of a bunch of hormonal teenagers that were forced to pilot these mechs to save humankind, kinda like Evangelion. But the world building specifically was some of the best in anime. It was a slow drip of scenes that gave you a glimpse into this dystopian future. And almost as if you were a prisoner to watching the show, they slowly fed you just little bits of plot, leading to so much suspense and you wanting to figure out what is this world, how did it become to be this way, along with even being paired with an amazing soundtrack and even an award-winning opening. All of this combined with a pink-haired, easily recognizable and lovable anime girl that was almost created with the sole purpose to capture your heart and capture your attention to make you want to watch the series. Basically, this was an anime setup that just could not fail, and it worked. Darling in the Franxx was released to almost universal positive reviews. In 2018, even I was running home from school to watch the next episode, just itching for that fix of the good old mecha anime, and of course more.
僕と一緒に。僕ならダーリンを連れ出してあげられる。
One thing that made this series extremely interesting as well is that it was an anime original. It didn't have a manga at the time that you can just go read to see what's gonna happen. If you wanted to see the development of the series, you had to just watch the next episode. And this really helped the series as there was weekly discussions of each episode as they released, and it was a lot of fun to be a part of at the time, especially when episode 14 released in April of 2018. And let's just say that was basically World War III for anime fans. More on that discussion a little bit later in this video. Hope you enjoyed that small little history lesson on the creation of Franxx. To fully understand the downfall of Darling in the Franxx, you first have to look at the rise of the series. Aside from it having two powerful anime studios animating a mech anime, which is basically a cheat code to make people want to watch it, and aside from
ダーリン、おはよう。はい、ダーリン。
it was the way that it was able to tell its story and the world building it was able to create. Each episode slowly expanded upon the dystopian world, just leaving you with so much suspense as to what's going to happen with the series, as before episode 19, you really could not guess how the series was going to end. Even 8 episodes into the anime, you almost don't even know what's going on in the world. Almost every moment you see up until this point is just a group of teenagers piloting a bunch of mechs to fight monsters in the giant glass dome, being an amazing blend between the fighting and the mecha aspect of the anime and then the drama of them all being teenagers, and leaving you with the questions of what's outside these glass domes, why are they in there, who and what are these monsters, and why are they even fighting. All you know is that humanity is now living in huge plantations, always under constant attacks by the Klaxosaurs, and in order to fight them off, Shinji has to get in the robot. I mean, hero. One of my favorite episodes is episode 7, which actually started off as your generic beach episode for the anime, which I didn't really think fit the anime. But just as they lost me with that, they got me right back into it. As just as teenagers do, they decide to go explore around the area, giving you a glimpse into the past civilization of this world, with a rundown and decayed town almost similar to something like in Nier Automata, being one of the first times I've seen an anime actually introduce actual plot into a beach episode. It's the small moments like this, just those few scenes throughout the beginning of the show that just made you so interested in this world. Even from the very beginning, with episode 1 showing how these teenagers are chosen to pilot, showing that it's some grand ceremony, but the adults seem to just not even care about it. They seem unbothered to even show up to the event. And the mechs themselves were a very interesting concept at the time for a mecha anime. Instead of being like how most mecha anime are handled, to where the skill and the power of the mecha suit is determined by the user's skill and their pairing with the mecha itself, Franxx takes a different approach to this concept, to where the power of the mech comes directly from the male and female pairing and how well they can synchronize themselves together. And aside from the pairing sequence just being a huge euphemism for doing the deed, which honestly when I was first watching the show and I was a little bit younger, it didn't really bother me, but now that I'm a little bit older rewatching this series, it's a little bit over the top at some points. But when you introduce a concept like this to where it's a synchronization of these two people coming together and then you mix it in with the drama of a hormonal teenager group and how their emotions are just running rampant, it really did make the fights very intense and dramatic. And with the development of Squad 13 and its relationships in this troubling world, that really became the true darling in this Franxx. Yeah, that was bad, I'll be honest. The main focus of course is on the main Franxx mecha of Storlitzia, which they actually do a pretty good job of being able to develop the character of 02 in direct relation with this mech suit that she's using. As with the pairing sequence, there was never a right partner for 02, until of course she meets Hiro, finally someone who's able to correctly pair with her. But this is another time that you can see the direct correlation between Neon Genesis and Darling in the Franxx, as the Storlitzias are shown to have a stampede mode very similar to the berserk mode of the EVA unit. And there is no greater episode to watch to show the true effort they put into the development of Squad 13 other than episode 8, which, going back to the conversations of the mating sequence they used to pilot these mechs, which, as a quick synopsis, after an incident during one of the Klaxosaur battles, all of the girls get together of Squad 13 and they decide to divide the household in half to avoid all of the boys and their behavior, leading to a sort of standoff between the two and until they find out a revelation of what happened to the previous squads of this universe. And of course in the end they're able to make up and get back together. One of the reasons that this is an amazing episode is most animes take place with high schoolers, but very few animes really delve into the topic of that, looking into the emotions of this youth group. And with me being a little bit older rewatching this, I was able to look back and think that this was a very realistic thing that would probably happen in this setting. Relating it back to Evangelion as well, it's very similar to how they were to develop the characters of Shinji and Asuka and them being young teenagers. I should really add like a shot counter or something for how many times I've said teenagers so far this video, but I think if I were to do that and you were keeping up with it, you'd probably be dead by now. But the reason that I say it so much is this is really one of the first animes, at least that I've seen, that really played into this plot point and did it in a really good manner as well. There's one thing that I haven't mentioned so far in this video about this series, and that is the ongoing war at this point that has been going on between the fans on choosing who is the better waifu, 02 or Ichigo. But to understand the conclusion of this battle, we first have to look at one of the most highest rated anime episodes of all times coming from this series, and that's episode 13. One of the major plots of this series so far is what it is to be a human. And what better character to talk about what it is to be a human other than 02 herself, which is half human, half Klaxosaur. Which brings the question, how is she half human, half Klaxosaur? Does that mean that there was some human that looked at something like this and thought, yeah, I can work with that? Although I'm sure there's somebody out there that probably thought that. That's not the case for her. She was made in a lab. So far, you have seen several scenes of 02 just feeling left out from Squad 13, as she feels like she's not fully human and can fully relate to them. The creators decided to tug at your heart as much as they could with this episode, showing off 02 as a small child. And honestly, one of the cutest little anime monsters you have seen, which makes you feel for her so much more as they show how she was abused and tortured as she was experimented on, until the fateful day that a young boy comes to save her and show her what it means to be a human and the kindness of humanity. And it's very clear and very obvious that that person is her darling, Hiro, who actually had his memories erased up until this point, now finally having them reunite after realizing that they knew each other from their childhood. And ending the episode with a very heartfelt ending of them coming together with an amazing song to pair with it. It felt like a very rewarding payoff to the character development you've seen so far of both Zero Two and Hiro, even causing this episode to go on to be almost critically acclaimed with a 9.5-star rating on IMDb. And to follow up such a highly rated and such a heartfelt episodes, the creators had to do something huge for episode 14. And something huge they did, because with all of the fans' emotions in the palm of their hand, the creators decided to start one of the biggest anime wars of all time.
3, 2, 1, go!
Oh boy, do I remember this episode. Twitter, Discord, Reddit, even your school lunch table. If there was a place to talk about anime, you were discussing this episode. And let's just hope you came out of it okay, because these were pretty heated discussions. After your emotions were at the highest to make you love and care for Zero Two, here comes Ichigo, ready to NTR you all and make sure she never gets to see Hiro again. You know, the person who you just watch an entire episode of their loving backstory from their childhood. Following Hiro being hospitalized after facing the effects of Zero Two's rampage, Ichigo goes on a rampage of herself to do everything in her power, and I do mean everything, to make sure she never gets to see Hiro again. Which honestly was probably because she wanted Hiro all to herself, but also because she felt threatened by Zero Two. One thing that always gets brought up in discussion about this episode as well that you can't leave out when discussing it is the controversy surrounding this episode, as this quite literally almost started a witch hunt in the anime community, as people were attacking the creators of this show with so much hatred towards Ichigo, which was a huge talking point about the effects of this and how, of course, this is not okay. Everyone knows, even if you dislike a character or whatever, they definitely took it too far with this episode. But aside from that controversy, this was a very powerful episode, and you really do see Ichigo doing everything in her power to take Hiro away from Zero Two, even getting to the point to where Zero Two even leaves the plantation, only to be followed by Ichigo kissing Hiro. Ichigo fans rejoiced all around the world, while Zero Two fans were more enraged than guts during the eclipse. And this started the anime war of 2018. Now, unfortunately, episode 13 and 14 really felt like the peak of Darling in the Franxx, as following this, we get into the downfall of the series. And the reason why most of you watching this video honestly probably forgot about this series, as it gets very forgettable after this part. I'm not the first person to talk about episode 19 and how horrible of an episode it means, and I really do mean the word horrible. And I can go on for almost an entire video itself about everything that went wrong with this episode, but there's multiple other videos that probably did it a lot better than I could. It is almost ironic that a series that had so many questions and left you just so intrigued into this world, when they finally explained everything, is also the episode that they ruined it all. As a short recap, some of the things that it ruined in the series, one of them being a major thing, was the creation of the Franxx units themselves. Going back to my favorite thing to compare this show to, way back to Evangelion again. Now, I definitely have my problems with that series, but at least in that series, they understood why the specific children had to pilot each unit after they built them. Regardless of how much they did or didn't know about the angels and their true biology, they at least were able to figure that out. Compared that to how Franxx treated the piloting of the Franxx units, the only explanation that Dr. Frank was able to get for the truly absurd and down bad system of piloting the Franxx units is that the pilots have to be a male and female pair with functional reproductive systems, which means that Dr. Frank and his team accidentally discovered this crucial part to piloting the Franxx units after they were already made. They had no understanding of really how it worked. If it weren't for an accidental discovery, they would have just had a lot of units that nobody could pilot. Along with the discovery of the true villain of the series, the Klaxosaur Queen, and who Zero Two was cloned based off of. And let's be honest, this is easily one of the most forgettable anime villains. I truly don't even know anybody who even remembers the Klaxosaur Queen. But instead of just ranting about the same thing, you see everybody who talks about this series talk about this episode. I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach and look into the behind the scenes and look into the animation studio and what went wrong there. In a more recent interview at Anime NYC in 2022, one of the directors, Hiromi Wakabayashi, stated, "If we were just going with the story is by the director, Atsushi Nishigori," which gives us our first glimpse into the true creation and the story of Darling in the Franxx. And in another question, he also answered that as a producer, he personally thought that working with with another studio in particular wasn't that much of a hurdle, but trying to visualize and animate what the director had in mind was much more difficult. And if for any reason you were guessing why they piloted the Franxx the way they do with those weird handles, well, it's a director's idea. Several times throughout this interview, it's basically them just pointing the fingers at the director, just saying that this was all his idea and essentially his story, and they were just there to animate it. Almost as if they're just pointing the fingers and putting the blame on him in a way. Which leads me to believe that with the creation of this story, it seems like the director had almost complete control of the writing without any checks and balances or outside people telling him a better direction for it to go in. With the animators not having much say in the project that they were creating, and with it being described as a relationship of oil and water mixing, the two things that are famously known for not mixing together, Darling in the Franxx from the beginning was just almost a passion project of the director, with the animators and teams not having too much input into the direction of the anime. Which I know it just may sound like me just guessing based off these small interviews, but I do think along the point, if the director didn't have complete control, somebody on the team would have probably said something like, hey, I don't think that this is really the best idea we can go with on this one. And if for some reason you're one of the rare anime fans that still enjoyed this series to the end and you want to see more and you're wondering if there's ever going to be a season 2, well, one of the producers said that it's really just up to the director on if he wants to produce another season, as it's truly just his story. And seeing how he treated the end of this story, I guess we'll just have to see. But if there's one thing you have to take from this series, it's that 02 is definitely better. I'm just joking, they can both go in the trash.